Insecurity has overwhelmed Buhari's government, says former President Olusegun Obasanjo. The presidency attacks the People's Democratic Party governance over comments on the performance of President Muhammadu Buhari. This is Plus TV Politics, and I'm Kofi Bartens. He welcomed President Olusegun Obasanjo, or former President Olusegun Obasanjo, has described the security challenges facing the country as a serious situation, calling for concerted efforts by stakeholders to stem the tide. Obasanjo, while reacting to the recent attacks on the Kaduna-Abuja train, where no fewer than 7 persons were confirmed dead, said the security challenge in the country has overwhelmed the Muhammadu Buhari administration. Also, Pan-Yoruba socio-political organization Afenifere has described the threat by Governor Nasir el-Rufai of Kaduna State to invite foreign mercenaries to fight local terrorism as an ominous sign for the country. Afenifere, in a statement by its National Publicity Secretary Jare Ajayi, said Governor el-Rufai's remarks call for serious interrogation and action on the part of all who should act. Now, joining us to discuss the situation is a security expert who'd like to say good evening and welcome to Jare Ajayi. Jare Ajayi, good evening. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. What are your thoughts on the description given by former President Olusegun Obasanjo that the Buhari administration is overwhelmed? Do you agree that they're overwhelmed with all the security breaches in recent time?
Well, one thing that you will always give to former President Obasanjo any day, any time, is that he is a prophet. And every time he speaks from angle of knowledge. And this is a man that has been military president. He has been a civilian president. And he has access to some level of, let me say, classified information, not necessarily passed to him, but because of the advantage of association, he's in the know. And he's a man that has intervened in security situations in many African countries. He is a man that who can easily interpret the weather to know if the cloud in the sky will eventually turn into a rain or it will just blow away. So any day, any time, I take his words seriously, and I expect that every responsible government should take his words seriously.
I remember very clearly, Jare Ajayi, that you were a guest on a program which I featured in at the time the attacks were going on, and you received that report and you shared it with me and with everybody who was following that program at that time. Are you surprised? Did you expect at the time you got that security report that it was going to be this bad?
Well, I knew, because for any organization or group to launch such an attack, it is with intention of maximum effect. And remember that similar attack took place October last year, which actually didn't give them much result. So for a group to have taken its time for 6 months to plan another attack, then you should know that definitely it must yield a lot. More so, every attack on the train or on a rail system is usually devastating in terms of the effect on the psyche of the people, and the material losses, and also possible human losses, as we've seen in this particular case. And we know that the group that we are referring to here, their sole objective is banditry. And banditry here is about money. Let me quickly say this. I've seen people, criticizing media when they refer to them as bandits and say they are not terrorists. Most people don't understand the meaning of terrorism. Terrorists are people who use terrorism as a means of advancing their cause. And terrorism usually is not a means, it's not an end in itself. It's just a means to an end. So when you want to qualify a group, you qualify the group based on what their intent or intentions are, which is the end itself, not the means. Now, when you're talking about Boko Haram or ISWAP, they are insurgents because that is their own end. They want a territory for themselves, and they use terrorism as a means to achieving that. So they're a terrorist group, but they are insurgents. So when we talk about these people are bandits that are using the act of terrorism to achieve their aim of kidnapping people for ransom or plundering communities, attacking villages. All their intention or all what they want is money, is funds. So they are bandits, but they are terrorizing the people.
Now, how do we juxtapose that with a ruling of a federal high court sitting in Abuja earlier, late last year rather, prescribing these bandit groups as terrorists? Of course, this took some months, but it was officially gazetted by the federal government through the Office of the Attorney General. So are we now expected to call the bandits terrorists? How does that play out? Because you're saying that they're
now,
still bandits.
The issue here is that what the courts had educated on is the action that they are carrying out. Because this is not a defined group. You see, it is easier for a court to say IPOB is a terrorist group because it is an association that is defined by objectives, and there are leadership, there are structure. You can easily define them as a group. So when you now classify such an organization, then anyone that associates with that organization can be said to be either be a member or aiding or abetting the advancement of such cause. Now, these guys are not structured. They don't go about under any name. They are just a bunch of criminals belonging to different camps and different groups that are operating under no known name, unlike JJN, that is Jamaatul Nasir Islami, whatever, that is the Boko Haram, and ISIS in the Islamic West African province. Those are groups that are defined by name and objectives. But these ones are a bunch of criminals.
But share data. I remember that the Abuja Division of Federal High Court did, in the ruling delivered by Milord, the Honorable Justice Taiwo, held that the activities of certain groups, they called he mentioned them specifically, or he wrote them down, Yan Bindiga and Yan Ta'ada. These are the groups that he mentioned with certain names as well. Does this not go against what you're saying?
There are certain groups at the initial stage that are operating, not that they are operating under that name, but they are classified based on maybe the name of the leader or what they choose to call themselves at that time. But we should not forget the fact that several groups had resurrected, several camps. We're talking about groups that are operating initially at Zamfara. Then we started seeing different camps within the forest of Kaduna, Katsina, Kebbi, Sokoto. Now we're talking about almost more than half of the forest of Niger State already occupied. And there are different groups under different leaders attacking Shiroro, attacking different parts of the state. So it's not that all those groups, unlike Boko Haram, that when you see them in Yobe or you see them in Borno State or in Adamawa, they are still Boko Haram.
All right,
but these ones are different.
Okay, we spoke to Senator or former Senator Shehu Sani, who represented the good people of Kaduna Central in the National Assembly. He is no longer in the National Assembly, but I'm sure you're well aware that he's been vocal on Kaduna issues and the banditry. He says he's even gotten to the point where some of the communities that are under attack have to rely on terrorists, these terror groups, that's the major terror groups that you were talking about, to protect them from the bandits. Is that something that you find possible, could be possible?
Well, I don't really understand that explanation, but what I understand is that this group usually approach some of these communities and say, you pay us this royalty, you pay us these taxes, then you can go to your farm and farm. When it is time for harvest, you pay us certain amount of money, then you can go and do your harvesting. For every trucks or trailers that will be leaving the community on market day, going to social places, you are going to pay us. Then you enjoy our protection. That is the understanding that I have. Now, we should not forget the fact that the attacks in October, intelligence report, and this was also reported in several media platforms, that the Boko Haram group under the ISIS sponsored, were involved in the train attack in October. They actually funded it. They provided the money. They provided the bomb experts that trained the people who carried it out, and they provided the equipment that were used for rigging the rail with explosives in October. That is a known fact. And that does not exclude them from this particular one that happened, even though no group had come out to take responsibility for the attack. But we should understand the fact that our armed forces are doing a good job right now in the Northeast. These two groups are almost decimated. The remaining bunch of them that are still there, they're actually at each other's neck right now. The ISWAP guys are attacking the Boko Haram. The Boko Haram are attacking them, fighting for survival as we speak. And right from, I think, about early last year, towards the middle of last year, there have been several reports of this guy relocating from the Northeast into the Northwest, most importantly, into the Niger State forest. So I will not be surprised if after following this attack, they've been able to make substantial amounts of money to reestablish their caliphate within that region. Then we'll start hearing about ISWAP now in the Northwest.
All right. So you're saying that there is a possibility that these train attacks or rail attacks are not just itinerant banditry or bandit activity, that it could be coordinated, calculated terrorist activity. We're talking about terrorists on the scale of ISWAP and Boko Haram, simply because they have to have the skill to put together improvised explosive devices. Do you find that putting together these IEDs and is not something we see bandits having the skill to do, and that you probably be seeing this more with trained terrorists?
You see, I had the opportunity of being trained on IED, and I know how dangerous it is for you to put up an explosive. Many people have found themselves killed in the process, even professionals. Even in the days of General Sani Abacha, one of the military officers in the explosive ordnance group that was trying to make demonstration close to the CEC, he made a mistake and there was an explosion. So even when it is being handled by professional, by expert, there could be accident. It's not something that somebody can just, easily begin to toy with. That's why even at the beginning of the Boko Haram, they rely on experts coming from Somalia, experts coming from Sudan to come and train the insurgents in Nigeria on how to handle IED. Now, intelligence has established that there have been handshake between insurgents in the Northeast and the bandits in the Northwest. The handshake had been established. And we should not forget the Kankara student kidnap at that time, involving Shekau, where Shekau came on here to try to take responsibility for the kidnapping of those children. And the just kidnapping took place in Kankara in Kaduna State. But the kidnapping was actually done by bandits. And Boko Haram, Shekau then tried to establish an agreement with them to transfer the ownership of those children to them under certain agreements and payment of certain sum, which eventually did not materialize because of the effort Kaduna State and Zamfara State government put in place then to ensure that they were able to get those students back. Now, that was, the first clear, experience or clear situation, that established the fact that truly there have been handshakes. And we've heard of bandits sending their men to the northeast to be trained. But for the October incident, the intelligence was clear and it was public that Boko Haram sponsored that attack.
So we're seeing now, from what you're saying, sort of a cooperation between these bandit groups and Boko Haram, who are under pressure and under the cush in the northeast due to the activities of the Nigerian armed forces. You talked about funding, and you talked about there being some intelligence to indicate that this the October attack was funded by or sponsored by Boko Haram. Is it that difficult, or how difficult is it for authorities in Nigeria to follow the money and to be able to decipher who is behind what and who is sending money to who?
Well, in those parts of the world, we are still very far behind in terms of financial intelligence. Our banking system and operation, there are still a lot of gaps that criminals and fraudulent people are still exploiting even today. So you can imagine the Yahoo boys are still able to move their money around into cryptocurrencies and the rest. And yet the NFIU has not been able to intercept this movement of money. That shows the extent of loopholes still within our own financial system. Now, we're not talking about people that are used to the traditional system of movement of money. Before now, terrorists globally, one of the things that they do is to hide, how they move their money. And one of the means that they use there is the Awala system. Though the Awala system is not, the Awala system is not as popular as before, but it's very, very much in use. The issue, the system of trade by barter are also still being used by those people, where they can exchange cow with weapons. I mean, for weapons. They will rustle cow, give cows to those who need cows, who have the weapons, and they take weapons from them. These guys collect their money in cash. They don't use their money to buy motorcycles. They tell the families of the victims that you are not only paying us cash for ransom, we want a specific type of motorcycles, specific number to be brought along with the money. They will tell you they want a certain number of battery packs, they want certain number of torchlights, they want certain numbers of supplies. That it is they've developed a way in which they get their supplies from the same people who are the relatives of the victims in their custody. And the cash that they have with them, they are using the traditional system to move this cash around. And one of the things that have been observed and have been raised around this, even I think I've also had Senator Shehu Soni also mention issues around this, is the fact that they do not believe that the owners of this money are actually in the forest with these guys. That if you've seen the way these guys are living, the people behind those guys, they are real leaders, or the people that are helping them to sustain this operation, they don't live inside that forest with them. And until we begin to start checking a whole lot of things, and these things will not happen under the current political arrangement that we're having. When I mean political arrangement, I don't mean democracy. I mean the areas where this problem is happening. The political structures in those areas will not allow military operations to be successful as much as we want it within the period that we want it to be.
How exactly do you mean? How exactly do you mean?
Good. One thing I can tell you that if President Olusegun Obasanjo is the president today, he will declare state of emergency. And the state of emergency that he's going to declare is going to suspend the political structure in those areas. Not that it's going to remove them, not that it's going to deny them their mandate, but it's going to suspend it and allow a structure as it is expected during an emergency rule situation that will enable arrest, prosecution, and the conviction that will be done within a week or two, where justice will be served immediately.
Yeah, but Shea Adetayo, I posed this question to Shehu Sunday last time we had him on air, and what he said was that the situation we had when Olusegun Obasanjo was president, when we had some riots and killings in Kanu and in Jos, reprisal attacks, a religious crisis between Christians and Muslims. And of course, there was a state of emergency declared. He said, oh, there were political undertones to that decision, but also that that particular crisis was different to what we have now. That what we have now, a state of emergency, will not necessarily make it easier for the authorities to track down the bandits or terrorists, as it were, because these guys are in the wild forest. You look at the large expanse of land in the northwest, you know, in Niger State, for instance, and in Kaduna State, where they are, that you don't need a state of emergency to go after these guys.
I do not agree with him in totality, and I'll give an example. There are times when, you know, just not long ago, the federal government suspended telecoms operations in some communities. It took a while before that decisions could go through, because issues around politics, fell into the midst of that decision. And at a point in time, we saw also pressure from some of the state governors that they want telecom operations to be restored. But we've forgotten the fact that the request was actually made by the military, because they needed those things to be done for them to be able to carry out certain aspects of their operations. And it took a while. It took them a lot for them to be able to convince, the political structure that it is the best action to take. Under a proper emergency rule, that won't necessarily be the case. The military will have all the leverage and the latitude that they need to carry out every action as long as it's within the law and what is within the United Nations Charter, to achieve their goals in any part of that geopolitical region that they need to liberate. Where they need to, black out telecoms is just a decision that they will take within minutes.
Before we go, because we're out of time, Governor Nasir el-Rufai last week said that intelligence was available and was made accessible to the authorities. From what we can see, the intelligence wasn't acted on. Intelligence indicating that there was going to be an attack on within a particular period, but that intelligence wasn't acted on. And he's also called, like you heard in the introduction, for the use of mercenaries in the Northwest. Very quickly, in one or two sentences, your take on that. Very quickly, please.
Okay, first one, the issue of the trade. If those states are under emergency rule, intelligence will not be available to NRC and advising NRC to suspend night operations, and NRC will go ahead and run a train in the night. Under an emergency rule, the military dictates the space, the security agency dictates the space. Every political structures, including the political appointees, must obey what they have said. Secondly, on the issue of Governor el-Rufai's call for the mercenaries, he is the governor. He's beyond his power, is beyond his position to bring mercenaries into the country. If mercenaries are going to be brought into the country, it's a decision that will be made at the federal level, and the only person who can authorize that, with the understanding of the National Assembly, is the president. So if he feels that that is the solution, then he needs to meet with the National Security Advisor and also the head of the military, have a good conversation with them, and not the kind of mercenaries like the one that he claimed to have settled, gave them money to prevent killing.
Jare Ajayi, we have to go, but we have to go. I think you've answered that question. There's a lot to ask. I hope we have you back soon so we can look at some other issues, including the use of drones and other technology to safeguard the rail track. Jare Ajayi has been a guest. He's a security consultant, and we've been talking security in the nation. Jare, thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. My pleasure is mine.
Thanks for staying with us right here on Plus Politics. We'll take a short break, and when we return, the presidency has responded to the People's Democratic Party governors who described President Buhari's performance as poor. This is up for discussion when we return.